Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Microsoft 365 Business Premium discussion. Focus for today is to really dive deep into Microsoft Defender Suite and Purview Suite add-ons for Business Premium. My name is Chris Clark. I am one of our field CTOs here at Netrix on our Office of the CTO team. I cover our entire cybersecurity portfolio, but most of my experience is with Microsoft security and compliance specifically over the last 10 plus years. So let's jump in here. And today, essentially, what we want to talk about is really understand where Business Premium kind of stops. So what is already in M365 Business Premium. There's a lot of great foundational pieces that are there. And then we'll understand really what's new with these two new add-ons that came out kind of late last year, giving you really enterprise capabilities that we'll dive into at a much deeper kind of detailed level. So those being the Defender Suite and the Purview Suite. And then we can kind of understand the pricing and potential consolidation if you have other third-party tools. So what we've commonly found before these suites came out, we work with small and medium businesses that have Microsoft 365 Business Premium. We'd recommend M365 E5 for those enterprise level security and compliance features. And it's kind of a financial jump where they're kind of lost interest pretty quickly. But what we found with these two new suites and kind of reevaluating that conversation and the topics that we'll talk about today, it's definitely come back into the conversation. So a lot of good changes, from that perspective. And we have, a lot of clients that have M365 Business Premium, and now can really, look at these features. So as we kind of jump in and understand, what's currently in Microsoft 365 Business Premium, kind of concentrating on more of the security and compliance features here, right? So we can compare those to the new Defender and Purview suites. So the endpoint protection is pretty interesting. It's kind of a middle ground of Defender for Endpoint. So there's multiple Defender for Endpoint plans. There's Defender for Endpoint Plan 1, there's Plan 2, and then there's also Defender for Business. So Defender for Business actually comes with M365 Business Premium. It's not completely to the level of Defender for Endpoint P2. It doesn't have some of the full kind of EDR threat hunting capabilities, which goes along with how incident response and more of the automation pieces work. So it's almost like a Defender for Endpoint Plan 1.5, if you will. So there's always been some nuances there, comparing, what you would have gotten in the E5 side with Defender for Endpoint Plan 2. So again, we'll go deeper into that and help understand, what the differences are there now with Defender Suite. But very similar with email security. So we kind of look at these technology pillars here, right? Endpoint protection we just talked about. We have email security. So, secure email gateway kind of scenario. Defender for Office 365 P1 comes with Business Premium. That's going to be kind of base safe links, safe attachments, anti-phishing policies, but it doesn't come with things like Attack Simulator or some of those automated pieces that I was mentioning, even with the Defender for Endpoint. Identity protection, you get some foundational pieces for sure with Enter ID P1, which is great, right? So you have conditional access, SSO, all great things there, but it doesn't have some of the advanced features of the P2 side. So we'll help understand and compare that area. And then when we look at kind of the Purview side, or data security, compliance, data governance, you really get some base DLP policies. So essentially Business Premium comes with Purview Information Protection Plan 1. And ultimately that is kind of basic DLP around Office 365. So your SharePoint, OneDrive, Exchange Online, the files in Teams, but not the chat in Teams. So there's some nuances there. You will be able to deploy sensitivity labels, but there's no auto labeling capabilities that there are on kind of the higher level licensing that we'll be talking about. So some limitations there. And then from the compliance side, you have kind of base e-discovery, and you don't have some of the other premium features, including ones around, AI that we'll dive deep into. So that's kind of the lay of the land for, current business premium. And really was kind of the only choice, until these suites came out. So the conversation again kind of ended, before that, but what's great about the two new suites with Defender Suite and Purview Suite is now you can kind of have this new conversation. So as we start to talk about that, we can understand what really a Defender Suite and Purview Suite are. Is they're actually what used to be called E5 security and E5 compliance. So there were different paths to getting to this. So full E5 included all these features, right? If we look at M365 E5, that was kind of that jump I was mentioning. If you go from business premium, which is, we'll talk detail and pricing in a few slides as well. But business premium is, generally retails for $22 per user per month. And then M365 E5, if you wanted to get all these features that we'll be talking about, and you're jumping up to $60 per user per month. So a significant jump in price there, and that's where these, really become attractive here. So again, Defender Suite is going to be Defender XDR. So full E5 security compliance or security features that, again, were an add-on to M365 E3 or included with E5. So now we have Enter ID P2. So we have on the identity side, risk-based conditional access components. We have privileged identity management. So you have just-in-time access to admin roles. So users using their admin roles only when they need it, right? And they elevate. You can have different levels of authentication strength on top of that, like phishing resistant MFA. So a lot of great controls and best practices around identity there. And then the risk-based policies will use different risk signals, so you can incorporate those into different areas like prompting for MFA in real time, prompting for higher levels of MFA, maybe a compliant device if there's a risky scenario. So you have a lot of flexibility there and some great features with Enter ID P2. So Defender for Endpoint Plan 2 comes with Defender Suite. So now we're looking at the endpoint protection. We have full kind of incident response capabilities and that XDR, extended detection and response platform, being able to correlate device telemetry and then work across these different areas in the Defender Suite. So looking at device identity, cloud apps, all those different signals is one of the key areas that you'll get with the Defender Suite as a whole. So Defender for Endpoint will give you that higher level threat intelligence. It will give you automation and those capabilities from the endpoint perspective. The next product within Defender Suite is going to be Defender for Cloud Apps. So think of primarily Microsoft CASB capabilities, but a lot more than that. So Defender for Cloud Apps can look at and inventory over 30,000 plus cloud apps. It could be things like Salesforce, Dropbox, Workday, all cloud applications across different categories, including AI, which is pretty much top of mind, right? Kind of understanding what AI apps could be used in your environment as a great use case for this. And then Defender for Cloud Apps can mark apps sanctioned and unsanctioned apps, and ultimately communicate back to Defender for endpoints and block those apps potentially. So if you're looking at, how do I control AI in my environment? I only want to allow, say, Copilot and Claude or whatever the case may be, then you can have that concept of sanctioned and unsanctioned apps with this capability. Then you also have Defender for Identity. So Defender for Identity is going to be essentially sensors installed on your domain controllers to look for authentications, different scenarios that would be happen. Like almost assume you've been breached within your Active Directory. So things like terms like pass the hash, pass the ticket, golden ticket, DNS reconnaissance. What would an attacker do? Even more so at scale with AI tools right now. So looking at different threats like that, but the key here is that they all communicate with each other, right? So that's the XDR component, is take all these signals, correlate them into incidents, and then have even automation around those as well. So again, this is Defender Suite was essentially the E5 security add-on before, right? But you'll see even on the enterprise side of things that it's also called Defender Suite. So very similar is, what about the data security side, right? And that's where the Purview Suite comes in. So we get more advanced DLP capabilities with endpoint DLP, Copilot DLP now. So being able to look at sensitive data that might be in your environment, hide it from Copilot users while it's remediated, maybe in parallel, and then allow you to kind of expand your Copilot type of rollout. So that's a great tool there from that perspective. You get Teams Chat DLP, including some other more advanced DLP features. Other items like Insider Risk are included. So Insider Risk is a great tool that pulls different signals from all the different areas. They call them indicators, essentially. So I could pull endpoint indicators, I can pull identity indicators, I can pull cloud app indicators. Maybe there's an exfil scenario if you've been compromised. So that's really what insider risk represents, and can even communicate with conditional access as well to send that risk signal over. So you also get what's called data security posture management, or DSPM. This is a lot of your kind of AI readiness tools, AI visibility, getting to the level of understanding what's being used in your environment, what policy controls you have. So kind of a central dashboard, if you will, or location and purview for controlling AI and Copilot. And then you have, advanced e-discovery and audit premium as well. So again, this was Purview Suite's now the new name for the E5 compliance add-on. So really, what I was talking about before, why it really matters is the kind of conversation usually kind of ended before this, right? I work with all sorts of businesses, small, medium enterprise, but my mind goes directly to enterprise features, right? And it was just too large of a jump to get those capabilities. So generally, what you'd find with business premium clients that like yourselves, it might be watching the webinar and the call, is you have third-party tooling, right? So we'll kind of talk about here next how to rationalize that and say, okay, maybe there's some overlap. If now you have these capabilities in Defender Suite and Purview Suite, we can do a tool consolidation exercise and kind of really look at it as a potential option, right, to consolidate on the Microsoft side. So diving, just a little bit deeper into the Defender Suite specifically, I covered a lot of these areas. This is just more of some of the other detailed information. So a few areas that, kind of didn't cover just a few minutes ago was one of the key features of Defender for Cloud Apps here being discovery and kind of policy coverage of OAuth apps. So any apps that users potentially could consent to that might, mimic their permissions. And most of the time users don't realize, what they're granting permissions. They could have full mailbox access or whatever the case may be. If you're not locking that down at enter ID to only, allow admins to control those, then, there's a huge vulnerability there. So Defender for Cloud Apps can help with that. And then there's also a concept of session controls that are very powerful. So if you're trying to allow some type of home PC, home Mac access, but want to limit what you can do, that's where session controls come in. So you're able to essentially block download, block print, block copy. You detect if it's not a trusted corporate device, either being a domain PC or a compliant device in Intune, or it even has a certificate capability, which is kind of unique, where it could check for a trusted cert that would be deployed to your corporate devices. So if it doesn't detect that, it switches into kind of these session controls essentially and limits what you can do. And now this is even integrated directly into Edge itself. So those policies just flow directly through the Edge browser and make the experience even more seamless than it was before. So again, high level here, went into detail just previously, but we have Enter ID P2, we have Defender for Endpoint Plan 2, Defender for Office for our email protection, Defender for Cloud Apps, which we talked about. But what that really gives you is this unified XDR experience in the security portals. So security.microsoft.com becomes your one-stop shop to show incidents and alerts, correlation between those, automation between those, almost like a mini SIM, if you will, right? That can also feed into some potential future items like Microsoft Sentinel as a SIM. But that data is correlated even with this type of licensing, right, to that level. So again, we're kind of comparing this to some of those base features that we talked about in Business Premium, almost like lighter versions of some of these, right? And then some of these are completely new capabilities that are only going to be in the Defender Suite. Very similar with Purview Suite as you dive a little bit deeper. The information protection components I was mentioning is the key here is that you have auto labeling capabilities. So you'll be able to label on the what's called the service side. So you have files at rest and SharePoint, Teams, OneDrive, and ultimately be able to assign labels based on sensitive info types that are discovered or other parameters or conditions. And then you'll also have client side auto labeling, which would be, say you're in the Microsoft 365 apps like Word, Excel, PowerPoint. It detects the social security number in the document a user is working in. It can recommend that label or it can enforce that label as well. So really some great features that help you really deploy labels, right? So manual labeling is very difficult to kind of push onto users, right? You'll have maybe default labels for new documents, but what do you do with existing content, right? Or if you want to auto label, based on sensitive information, that's when the Purview Suite is required here, and one of those key features. Very similar is you can use the Purview Information Protection Scanner to scan against file shares, and then also SharePoint on-prem if you still have SharePoint on-prem. So your base features in Business Premium will allow you to discover with that scanner, but now you can auto-label with that scanner with the Purview Suite. And then some more advanced classifiers become available with Purview Suite as well. So thinking about some of these items like trainable classifiers, you can actually, Microsoft has templates, things like financial documents, invoices, kind of categories, but the real power comes in of you being able to feed information that might represent the type of documents in your environment. So if you're a professional services firm and you create like statements of work, you probably have a pretty similar format that can be detected with kind of machine learning AI mix that does it. And that's what trainable classifiers represents. So you'll be able to use those throughout all of Purview, in DLP and auto labeling and retention. So lots of great capabilities there. And then another area there is going to be exact data match. So being able to match data directly against kind of an exact data set, typically in healthcare, like medical record numbers, maybe client numbers, you securely upload this information to check directly against versus trying to do things like regular expressions and items like that, right? That are prone to false positives potentially versus the actual data to check against. So some great features there. Again, some of the items that we mentioned, insider risk management being key. So if we look at how we deploy, Purview Suite in your environment, I would call probably three main areas, like your foundational pieces of Purview. So information protections can be your sensitivity labels that you want to deploy, right? Including those auto labeling capabilities, DLP, including endpoint DLP, Copilot DLP, and then insider risk management. I would say your three foundational pieces that, if we're having conversations with clients about deploying anything to do with Purview, those come into play typically, right? So that becomes good part of your strategy to kind of start there, but you can see there's other areas like communications compliance, which even has some components around AI as well, right? It's kind of detect potential malicious prompts and things like that. And then including kind of fundamentally e-discovery and your data lifecycle, right? So retention policies and capabilities there and records management. So again, Purview Suite's your full E5 compliance stack. So maybe you have other compliance tools, right, as well that are in place. So we can kind of help with that tool rationalization as well around this area. So we can really start to see that, having this capability to add Defender Suite and Purview Suite really gets you very close to the E5 features. From a pricing perspective, they're really $10 each per user per month. So again, business premiums $22 per user per month. You add Defender Suite, you're at $32 per user per month. If you add the Purview Suite as well, you're at $42. If you add them both, it's $15. So there's definitely a benefit to adding both there, right? From a cost perspective, kind of a significant savings overall, especially if you look at how these features get added a la carte before. So there's also kind of a Copilot benefit as well that looks like it's ending at the end of this year, December 2026. So kind of 50% off your first year with Purview Suite if you add Copilot licenses. So some bundling potential there, right? Benefits. But this really becomes pretty viable option, right? Because if you look at E5, it's generally around 60 or so retail, right? But sometimes E5 might be warranted as well. So it's you start to do this kind of tool rationalization that we'll talk about in just a little bit, but then also maybe there's some features in E5 that still make sense that really warrant you jumping up to that level. So what I've outlined here is some of those features, including brand new ones that are just hitting tenants right now, right? So kind of question here is, when does it make sense to jump to M365 E5? Everything we just learned about how close you can get to E5, right, with Defender Suite and Purview Suite, really leads us up to this kind of comparison here. So two of the new capabilities that are E5 only are Intune Suite. And this, if we look at E5, you get the full Intune Suite. There's parts of Intune Suite and M365 E3, so it gets a little confusing. So you can kind of see, there's a breakdown there. But if we look at the full Intune Suite, what we've been told essentially, and we've seen in clients, is some clients have started to see this roll into their E5 licensing. It should be happening this month into next month into July, where you'll have full Intune Suite capabilities. So we have things like endpoint privilege management on the endpoint itself. So being able to have policy controls around installing apps for standard users, right, as a best practice on your endpoints. You have remote help. Maybe you're using something like TeamViewer or GoToAssist or whatever the case may be. And you have some other features like Cloud PKI. So some great enhanced Intune components come with E5, and that is all considered what's called the Intune Suite. So that used to be licensed separately, essentially, and now that's included with E5. So similar with Security Copilot is Security Copilot at the high level is based on consumption pricing, essentially within Azure. So it uses what's called security compute units or SCUs. So now Security Copilot's included with E5, and then based on the number of users you have, you get some SCUs, right? So if you're on the smaller side, as we're talking about, say under 300 users, where the business premium is kind of capped at, essentially, right? So the hard cap of using M365 Business Premium is 300 users. So if you're, growing past that, you're, expanding the business, maybe M&A activity, whatever the case may be, you might go over that limit, and E5 becomes relevant, right? In that case, but you'll get number of SCUs per user. So I think it's 400 SCUs per 1,000 users. So if you're below that, it'll be prorated for the number of users that you have. So those are two brand new features. But then what else does E5 bring to the table is Power BI Pro. So if you're really heavy into Power BI, not just consumption of the Power BI content, but actually creating Power BI content, might warrant Power BI Pro for every user. Very similar is going to be Teams phone or advanced voice capabilities. So if you're looking at, consolidating your phone system in the Teams, you have the benefit of that licensing as well in E5. And then one other area is what's called a Sentinel E5 ingestion benefit. So if you are looking at Sentinel as a SIM, you get certain ingestion from a daily perspective per user. So I think it's 5 megabytes per user per day that's included, alongside what's already kind of free with certain connectors from the M365 side. So some other benefits here, right? We start to rationalize everything. Does it make sense to look at the new add-on suites that we've been talking about, or does E5 make sense potentially, right? And now it's even more so. E7 came out, so that becomes part of the conversation. So now you can rationalize even more. All right, are we using Copilot? Are we using agents? Do we need visibility with Agent 365? Maybe we need some higher level identity governance features. And now you're potentially looking at E7. So I know it's a little daunting, but we can help with all that kind of rationalization and understanding. But that's really kind of the way to look at it, right? It's just understand what needs you have, maybe what current tooling you have, and start to compare that. So that's kind of thinking about, why would I go to E5 instead of looking at those suites? So, from kind of recommended next steps perspective, we can really help out in all these areas. So my role on the Office of the CTO team is to kind of have these conversations on a daily basis, which I do. So kind of rationalizing your third-party tooling, how does that map to the Microsoft side? Doing what we call kind of a Microsoft 365 health check, which is one of our offerings. Being able to sit down and say, here's how you're currently using your licensing. Maybe you have different personas, you have frontline workers versus corporate users. So each one kind of determines which licensing route you might go. But ultimately, you start to look at, you need security and compliance features that match with all users. So you can't really mix and match, and that's where confusion comes in. But we can help kind of understand that, do more of an assessment, licensing tool review. We have a very large professional services team, right, that can deploy all these components that we're talking about. And then from a managed services portfolio, we have, lots of capabilities from that perspective as well, right? So you get to the point in your roadmap where you need to run or you need support. We have managed detection and response with Microsoft Sentinel, one of our key SIM capabilities that are mentioning, kind of the Defender Suite almost being like a mini SIM, and then feeding into Sentinel, right, as potential next step to get other different sources that are maybe outside of the Microsoft ecosystem or whatever it may be. Sentinel is even incorporated into the Defender portal as well. So lots of integration there. We also offer kind of unique service of managed detection and response around Purview. So same SOC model that we have with Sentinel and Defender for Endpoint and the Defender side and other log sources, but now we have detection and response for Purview alerts and insider risk management alerts. So lots of great areas. Definitely here to help if you reach out and get you in touch with the right people there from that perspective. But again, it's one of that first step here is kind of understanding what you have, what you're using, maybe what third-party tooling you have. So as we kind of round things out and dig a little bit deeper into that, these are some examples that we commonly find in having those kind of assessment conversations. So when we think about third-party tooling, typically from secure email gateway side of things, we run into Mimecast, Proofpoint, Barracuda. Right. What does that map to? That maps to Defender for Office 365 Plan 2. So again, that being part of the Defender Suite add-on. And then from an EDR antivirus perspective, right, CrowdStrike, Sophos, SentinelOne, Symantec, all the major players out there maps to Defender for Endpoint Plan 2, again, part of the Defender Suite. And then from an identity standpoint, very different MFA providers, right? Different identity components. So it could be Duo, could be Okta, could be Ping. So lots of different components there, maybe even related to the IDP you're using as well, right? So if you're using Okta as your IDP or Ping, there's also even a direct migration path directly to the Entra ID P2 features, right, including MFA, and even more important topic now is phishing resistant MFA that are having conversations with all clients about as the next step. So that will get you to the Entra ID P2 kind of rationalization here, including those risk-based conditional access policies. And then on the compliance side, right, mapping to the Purview Suite, Varonis is one of the key areas we see. Digital Guardian, ForcePoint, Symantec DLP, either if it's endpoint DLP or kind of traditional discovery and other DLP capabilities, that's going to map to the Purview features that we've been talking about, right? Purview DLP, sensitivity labeling, insider risk management. And then with the e-discovery side, kind of rounding things out, you have some archive systems, potentially, whatever the case may be, is going to map to, Purview e-discovery premium in that case. So again, that's one key area. Now you can really kind of do this rationalization, right? So if you have business premium, you most likely had, some of these third-party tools, and now we can understand, maybe you have contracts coming up, what the cost of those are, what's the comparison and consolidating to the Microsoft side with Purview Suite or Defender Suite, and we can help, map those products for you in that way. So kind of rounding things out, some of the, licensing nuances here, I briefly mentioned kind of throughout is that you do have the 300 seat cap, right? You don't really want to mix different components with that, right? So it is kind of a hard limit. If you're going past that, you might want to rationalize looking at the full M365, E3 plus add-ons or E5 side. So that is a hard cap. It gets a little confusing if, say, you have Defender for Business and then you add, some Defender for Endpoint Plan 2. They just don't mix well, right? It has to be kind of a consolidated approach. And again, that's where that kind of assessment methodology comes in, where we can help out with. For the add-ons, of course, Business Premium is required. So you have to be starting with Business Premium. You can't start with like Business Standard or Basic. Those are again, just kind of side note of those, running into them, off and on. Those are, have base security features in that, but realistic kind of, minimum you would want to look at is business premium, and then ideally again with these add-ons here as well. So this is fully available now. I think late last year is kind of when it first came into play with the add-ons, and then some of the renaming, right, of the suite products that we've been talking about. So just some pieces of information there, and then one area that the nuances that I think we already hit on is that Defender for Business one. That's one that gets fairly confusing, right? It's very close to Defender for Endpoint Plan 2, but it's not the exact same as Defender for Endpoint Plan 2. So your best bet is to look at the Defender Suite, right, to have those full capabilities. And especially when you do this tool rationalization, if you find you can replace two tools, right, versus purchasing things a la carte, it's like by the time you look at two, the price of the suite makes complete sense, right? So same thing would go for Purview if you have those other components. So really kind of rounding things out, we look at those third-party contracts, right? Do that tool rationalization. So hopefully, essentially, what everyone got from today is kind of understanding there are new options, right? One key piece here, kind of recapping, is that now we have the ability to add Defender Suite and also Purview Suite to your M365 Business Premium licensing. Capabilities that were only available in kind of the higher level licensing are now available. You can really start to look across those two main areas of security tooling, and then also data security, data governance, and compliance components that are mapping to Purview. Potentially you're using some of those third-party products. Maybe there's a tool rationalization, cost savings, consolidation that can happen. And you really get these enterprise level features for what was traditionally small and medium business type of targeted licensing. So hopefully everyone found this information useful, and I appreciate everyone's time today, and have a great day.